Welcome to the Kenya Wantam Nantam Movement podcast. Today, we're diving deep into a story that for decades has been deliberately kept in the shadows. You see, the official history of Kenya, well, it's a carefully written story, one that celebrates power, one that celebrates the victors. But in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and uncover the story they really don't want you to know.
Think about it. When you walk through any town or city in Kenya, what do you see? Street signs, monuments, public squares. Who are they named after? Almost always, they honor the powerful. The presidents who amassed wealth, the ministers who held on to power. But what about the truly brave? The people who stood up to injustice, who spoke the truth when it was dangerous, the ones who actually died for the ideals this nation is supposed to represent? Yeah, their names are almost nowhere to be found.
So that's the big question, isn't it? The question at the very heart of this whole explainer. Who were these brave people? Who are these heroes whose stories have been silenced, twisted, or just flat out erased from our memory? Well, let's start that journey and find them.
Okay, so to understand who was forgotten, you first have to understand how the official story got written in the first place. After independence, the new government, led by figures like Jomo Kenyatta, knew something crucial. If you want to control the future, you have to control the past. So they crafted a narrative that put them right at the center, celebrating their own rise to power while pushing anyone who challenged them to the sidelines.
And this is where we get to the heart of it. This is where we start digging up the stories of the heroes who were buried. And I mean that literally, sometimes in unmarked graves. These were men and women whose integrity, whose courage, whose deep commitment to real justice made them a threat to the new establishment. Their stories were a mirror, and the powerful just didn't want to look at their own reflection.
Let's start with a name you should know. Pio Gama Pinto. He was a journalist, an activist, a socialist, a man who fought tirelessly against colonial greed, and then, without missing a beat, fought against the new greed that took root right after independence. For him, freedom wasn't just about changing a flag. It was about creating a fair and equal society for everyone. This quote, it was his entire philosophy. Pinto's voice was one of the sharpest, one of the most courageous in the brand new nation. He was funding other liberation movements and publishing articles that the new government absolutely hated. And for that, he paid the highest price. In 1965, he was assassinated in his driveway. His voice was silenced forever. And then the state machine got to work, burying his legacy under so much propaganda that for generations, most people wouldn't even know his name.
And this slide, it just says it all, doesn't it? Zero. A big, fat zero. Despite everything he did for the freedom struggle, despite his fight for a just Kenya, there are no major national monuments honoring Pio Gama Pinto. His grave is quiet, a powerful, silent testament to how thoroughly his memory was scrubbed from the official story. All right, let's move to another powerful voice, J.M. Karuki. This man saw with terrifying clarity exactly where Kenya was headed. He warned everyone who would listen that independence was being hijacked by a tiny elite, creating this massive gap between the rich and the poor. And this quote, this wasn't just a clever line. It was a prophecy of a future he was desperately trying to stop. And just like Pinto, J.M. Karuki's voice was considered too dangerous to exist. In 1975, he vanished. His body was found later in Nangong Forest, and it was clear he'd been brutally murdered. Sure, there was an official inquiry, but surprise, surprise, it went nowhere. His killers were never brought to justice. It was a clear, chilling message to anyone else who dared to speak out so loudly. Now we turn to a name that's probably more familiar, but whose legacy is just as complicated in the official story, Dedan Kimathi. As a leader of the Mau Mau, he was the face of the armed fight for freedom. He refused to bend a knee to the British or their collaborators. For his defiance, he was captured and executed by the colonial government back in 1957. And this just perfectly captures the country's conflicted memory. For decades after independence, the new Kenyan government was, hesitant to fully embrace Kimathi. Why? Maybe his legacy was just too radical, a reminder of a promise of land and true freedom that still hadn't been delivered. A statue was finally put up, but this question here, it still hangs in the air. Kenya celebrates its independence, but the body of the man who fought so hard for it is still lost, somewhere in an unmarked grave. And look, the names we've just discussed, they aren't isolated cases, not even close. This was a pattern, a tragic, systematic pattern.
You've got Reverend Timothy Njoya, beaten bloody for demanding democracy. Bishop Alexander Muge, who died in a very suspicious car crash right after exposing corruption. Dr. Robert Uko, the foreign minister, murdered after he started asking questions. And freedom fighters, men like Field Marshal Moriyama, Kungu Kurumba, and Fred Kubai, all of them fought for liberation only to be forgotten, to vanish, or to die neglected by the very state they helped create. So this brings us to the most important question of all. Why? Why was there such a deliberate, sustained effort to erase these people from history? And the answer? It's not just about politics. It's about power, it's about money, and it's about protecting a system that made a few people very, very rich at the expense of everyone else. And this quote right here, it just nails it. It gets right to the heart of the matter. These heroes weren't silenced because they were rebels trying to overthrow the government. No, they were silenced because they threatened to expose the truth. Their integrity, it revealed the rot in the system. Their questions about inequality, that threatened the profits of the new elite. And their courage was a constant, embarrassing reminder to those in power of the ideals they had sold out. This comparison right here perfectly shows the two different roads Kenya could have taken. On one side, you have Billy Kajia. He was a freedom fighter right alongside Kenyatta. But he refused to betray what they fought for. He stood up in parliament and called out the new government for abandoning the poor. He refused to enrich himself, lived a humble life, and died poor, totally forgotten by the state. And on the other side, Jomo Kenyatta. He started as a symbol of resistance but became a master of power. He rewarded his friends, crushed anyone who disagreed with him, and his family became one of the richest in the nation. His face is on our money. Two freedom fighters, two completely different paths. So the path that was chosen sent a message, and it was a chilling one, to every generation that followed. The way honest leaders like Kajia were treated made it crystal clear what the new state really valued. It wasn't integrity, it wasn't sacrifice, it wasn't a commitment to the poor. The state made it known that clean hands would not be rewarded. In fact, they would be punished. Okay, so what happens when a country just decides to erase its conscience? What's the real cost of this kind of national amnesia? Well, a nation's memory isn't just a history book, it's a mirror. It reflects who we are right now, and it shows us where we're headed. And this right here is the whole point. When Kenya erased these stories, it wasn't just losing some historical facts. It was losing a piece of its own soul. It was forgetting its own capacity for courage, for integrity, for justice. It was forgetting what it truly means to be a nation that was built on a promise of freedom for everybody. And the consequences of leaving this big, empty space in our memory are huge. They distort reality. When the real heroes are forgotten, it creates a vacuum where thieves and crooks can step in and be celebrated as heroes. Suddenly, political murder gets spun as patriotism, as something necessary to keep the country stable. And real courage, the kind that speaks truth to power, that gets dismissed as an annoying nuisance, something that just gets in the way of progress. So where do we even begin to fix this? Well, the very first step is simple. We have to break the silence. We have to start the conversation. We have to tell these stories over and over again until they can't be ignored anymore. And that is the entire mission of the Kenya Wantam Nata movement. It's a platform to start this vital work of restoring our nation's memory. We really encourage you to go check it out. And that brings us to this incredibly powerful idea. Remembering isn't just some passive thing you do. It's an active form of resistance. It's how we fight back against a false story. And it's how we, the people, can start to piece back together a history that was stolen from us. So what does this resistance actually look like? Well, here are 4 clear steps. First, we have to tell the true stories of these forgotten heroes. Second, we need to actively challenge the official, sanitized history that's taught in schools and repeated on national holidays. Third, we have to demand justice, even when it's uncomfortable. And finally, and this is the most important one, we have to turn all these ideas into real, concrete action. And here is exactly how you can start doing that right now. The Kenya Wantam Nata movement is built for action from the ground up. You can go to the website, www.wantamnatatom.com, and create your account. It's totally free. All 47 counties are listed there. Just find your county and start posting. Start sharing your ideas that can help change your village, your city, and ultimately our entire nation. We'll leave you with this final thought. A country's monuments, they're like a public confession of what it truly values. Right now, Kenya's public spaces value power and wealth over integrity and courage. So the question for every single one of us is this: How long will Kenya choose to be haunted by the heroes it refuses to honor? The power to answer that question is in our hands. Thank you for listening to the Kenya Wantamata Movement podcast.